I never imagined that a single falsehood could unravel the meticulously woven tapestry of my existence. Yet, as I sit in the dim light of my cramped New York apartment, a space littered with the remnants of forgotten manuscripts and half-drunk coffees, I am forced to confront the devastating truth. I lost everything because of a lie. A lie that in its inception seemed as innocuous as a whispered secret on a cool autumn afternoon, but grew, insidiously, into a force that dismantled my very identity. It all began on a brisk October day when the leaves in Central Park danced in a whimsical ballet of amber and crimson. I was on my usual walk, my mind oscillating between fleeting dreams and the harsh reality of a mediocre advertising career. In those early days, I fancied myself a sort of alchemist of language, capable of transforming mundane ideas into vibrant, marketable fantasies. I was convinced that with enough eloquence and clever turns of phrase, one might bend reality to one's will. What I did not foresee, however, was that the very art of persuasion I so prized would lead me to fabricate a persona that was as alluring as it was unsustainable. Her name was Evelyn, a woman whose understated beauty and quiet melancholy evoked the delicate brushstrokes of a Renaissance portrait. We first met at an art gallery opening, a veritable playground for those who wore their pretensions as badges of honor. As I navigated through clusters of culture chatter, I found her standing alone before an abstract painting, a riot of color that defied simple explanation. Unable to resist the urge to engage her, I remarked, "That piece seems to hide a sorrow that only the brave dare acknowledge." Evelyn's eyes, a striking shade of green that hinted at long-forgotten secrets, met mine. "Perhaps it speaks of truths unspoken, or maybe it reflects our own fragmented souls," she replied, her tone measured and laced with both amusement and regret. In that moment, an emotional connection sparked between us, one that promised intimacy and shared vulnerability even as we both carried the weight of our private demons. Yet, as our conversations deepened over candlelit dinners and whispered confidences in moonlit park benches, I realized there was something I could not confess. In my eagerness to impress, I had spun a web of deception. I portrayed myself as a scion of wealth and cultured refinement, a man born into affluence with a pedigree of success. In truth, I was a struggling writer whose bank account and self-esteem had long been eroded by life's harsh realities. Every romantic gesture I offered, every carefully rehearsed anecdote, was colored by the lie I had chosen to live. I believed, foolishly, that love could triumph over pretense, that Evelyn would look past the fabricated narrative if our hearts were true. For a while it worked. Our romance bloomed amid clandestine rendezvous in hidden cafes and stolen moments on rain-soaked sidewalks. I would surprise her with wildflowers plucked from the park's overgrown corners, each stem a silent ode to our ephemeral connection. We dined in intimate bistros where the ambience was as intoxicating as the conversation, and for a fleeting period, I believed I had crafted a reality in which truth and beauty coexisted harmoniously. But as all fragile edifices built on half-truths must eventually crumble, so too did mine. The first signs of dissonance were subtle, a misremembered detail here, a contradictory statement there. I began to notice the flicker of doubt in Evelyn's eyes, and hear the hushed whispers of colleagues questioning my credentials. A trusted friend from the advertising firm, once a fervent admirer of my genius, now eyed me with a suspicion that cut deeper than any criticism ever had. That one rainy evening, the kind of night when the city's neon reflections blurred into watery smudges, I found myself alone with Evelyn in my apartment. The incessant patter of rain against the window served as a grim metronome to our unraveling. "I want to believe in you," she murmured, her voice trembling as much from emotion as from disappointment. "But I need the truth, the real you." I tried to weave another of my deceptions into a flimsy denial, but the lie, long nurtured and now grotesquely oversized, refused to be masked. In the days that followed, the consequences cascaded with relentless precision. My firm, now privy to my fabricated background, terminated my contract with a formality that stung like a betrayal. Former friends, once eager to share in my supposed successes, distanced themselves, leaving me marooned in a sea of self-reproach. And Evelyn, the one person who had dared see through the layers of artifice, retreated into an impenetrable silence, a silence that screamed of irrevocable loss. I wandered the city's streets like a ghost, each step punctuating the collapse of the identity I had so desperately constructed. In a lonely cafe on a rain-soaked afternoon, I recalled how I had once believed that embellishment was a necessary art in a world that valued image above all else. Yet, as I sat amid the clamor of everyday life, I recognized that the truth, raw, painful, and unadorned, held a kind of beauty that I had long since abandoned. Unable to bear the crushing solitude and the haunting regret, I sought refuge in my only remaining passion, writing. Night after night, I filled pages with the story of my undoing, a litany of self-deception and its catastrophic consequences. These manuscripts, unpublished and raw in their honesty, became both my penance and my only companions. In the solitude of those hours, the act of writing transformed into a confession, each sentence a fragile step toward absolution. Yet, even as I poured out my remorse, the specter of the lie lingered. It was not merely the act of deceiving others that pained me. It was the betrayal of my own self. In my attempt to reinvent myself in the eyes of another, I had lost the one person I was meant to be. The irony was both bitter and stark. I had sacrificed my authenticity on the altar of success, and, in doing so, had doomed my chance at genuine love. One day, as winter's chill began to soften into the tentative warmth of early spring, I found solace in a quaint, independent bookstore tucked away in Greenwich Village. There, among the dusty tomes and the comforting musk of age paper, I encountered a peculiar old man with eyes that shone with a mischievous wisdom. His presence, an anachronism in our modern age, seemed to embody a secret knowledge of life's paradoxes. "Ah, young man," he greeted in a voice as rough and measured as the turning of an ancient page. "You wear your sorrows like a well-tailored suit, visible yet refined. Tell me, what burdens you so?" I hesitated before confessing. I lost everything to a lie so carefully spun that it once felt like the truth itself. A smile, subtle and knowing, curved his lips. "Truth, my dear fellow, is a fickle mistress. It has a way of surfacing when we least expect it, often uninvited and unwelcome." His words, laced with irony, resonated deeply. In that moment, I realized that my personal tragedy was but one manifestation of a greater human frailty, a world where appearances are prized over authenticity, and where every success is measured by the stories we tell ourselves. Thus began a slow, painful journey of atonement. I took on odd jobs, a brief stint as a waiter in a diner whose neon lights were as garish as the promises they advertised, and later, teaching a creative writing workshop at a community center. Each day was a lesson in humility and a reminder that redemption was a process, not a sudden miracle. It was during one of these classes that I met Margaret, a woman whose quiet resilience and wry humor belied the tumult of her own past. With piercing blue eyes and a gentle laugh, she possessed the rare ability to see beauty in broken things. One crisp afternoon, while we sat on a park bench under a canopy of aging oak trees, Margaret said, "Life isn't a series of grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It's found in the everyday, those small moments of kindness, the fleeting smiles exchanged with strangers. Our flaws make us human. Our honesty, however painful, makes us real." Her words struck a chord deep within me. In that instant, I began to see that the path to forgiveness, both from others and from oneself, lay not in concealing our imperfections, but in embracing them. Slowly, the fragments of my former life began to coalesce into something new. Margaret's unwavering support and the introspection born of solitude rekindled a faint, yet persistent hope. Together we explored the city's hidden corners, quiet art exhibits, underground jazz clubs, and dimly lit diners where the clatter of dishes played a symphony of everyday struggle. In those shared moments, I began to feel that perhaps the lie, for all its destruction, had also been the catalyst for an awakening. It had stripped away the inauthentic veneer I had clung to so desperately and forced me to confront the truth about myself. A truth that, however raw, was mine to own. Yet, even as the seasons turned and my inner world slowly mended, the consequences of my deception continued to echo. News articles, once buried in the recesses of online archives, resurfaced with brutal clarity. Social media, the modern-day purveyor of gossip and scandal, had not forgotten my transgressions. Every headline and comment felt like a public ledger of my failures, a constant reminder that in losing my fabricated identity, I had lost something far more precious: the trust of those I had once loved. Haunted by this relentless public scrutiny and the private void left by Evelyn's departure, I began a pilgrimage of sorts, an inner quest to reclaim the parts of myself long suppressed. In the quiet of midnight, with the city's cacophony reduced to a distant hum, I would pour my sorrow and my defiance into pages that blurred the line between confession and art. Each manuscript was a step toward rebuilding a self that was no longer defined by falsehoods, but by the courage to be imperfectly real. And so, as winter's grip loosened and the tentative blooms of spring emerged, I found myself at a crossroads. The lie that had once seemed so necessary, so integral to my survival, now lay exposed like brittle ruins beneath the unyielding light of truth. In its place emerged not a man of grandeur, but a flawed soul determined to learn from the wreckage. I realized then that the cost of deception was measured not in dollars or social standing, but in the slow erosion of one's soul, a truth I carried like a scar, both painful and instructive. In accepting this bitter lesson, I made a promise to myself to seek redemption through honesty, however messy and uncertain the path might be. I began to write again, not the polished fables of success I once peddled, but raw, unfiltered narratives that spoke to the heart of human fallibility. In the fragile act of honesty, I discovered a strength that had long been buried beneath layers of pretense. I was not the man who had once reveled in the artifice of a lie. I was a man reborn from the ashes of his own deception, determined to find beauty in the unvarnished truth of his existence. As dusk turned to night outside my window, I sat before a blank page and began anew. The journey of self-discovery, though riddled with pain and regret, had shown me that every broken shard of our past could, when gathered with care, form a mosaic of redemption. And though the memories of that fateful lie would forever haunt me, I now understood that they were also the crucible in which my true self had been forged. In the wake of my tentative steps toward redemption, life began to unfold in ways that defied both expectation and logic. It was as if the universe, ever ironic, had decreed that the ruins of my past were not meant to languish quietly in obscurity, but to ignite a cascade of events so surreal that even the most skeptical observer would struggle to believe them. One chilly evening, as twilight yielded reluctantly to night's embrace, I received an unexpected invitation. The letter arrived in an envelope of thick, cream-colored paper with no return address. Only a single, elegant line. For a man seeking the truth in the ruins of his past, a revelation awaits. The handwriting was unmistakably Margaret's, though the urgency in every sweeping curve hinted at matters far graver than mere sentiment. With a heart simultaneously heavy and hopeful, I resolved to follow her summons. The address led me to an abandoned warehouse on the city's fringe, a crumbling edifice that time had nearly forgotten. Its broken windows and weathered brick seemed to murmur secrets of decades past. Stepping inside, I was greeted by an assembly of figures gathered around a flickering bonfire. They formed a loose circle in the cavernous interior, their faces illuminated by the erratic dance of flame. There was an air of expectancy, as though each person had been summoned to witness something extraordinary. At the center of this unusual congregation stood a tall, lean man with silver hair and eyes that shone with an almost mystical intensity. He introduced himself as Archibald, the self-appointed curator of forgotten truths and lost stories. In a voice both mellifluous and commanding, he intoned, "Welcome, seeker, to the sanctuary of unvarnished truth, where every shattered dream and broken promise is honored as a testament to our shared humanity. His words, grand yet sincere, resonated with something deep within me. Archibald explained that this gathering was but one manifestation of the Veritas Society, a clandestine collective of artists, writers, philosophers, and individuals who had suffered profound personal losses. To them, my tragedy was not an isolated misfortune, but a microcosm of a broader existential malaise. A society addicted to facades and willing to pay dearly for the luxury of illusion. In the days that followed, I became a regular at the Society's secret meetings. Every gathering was an immersive experience, a riot of ideas, emotions, and sometimes downright surreal theatrics. I listened to members recount tales that bordered on the unbelievable. A woman whose misprinted biography had toppled her entire corporate empire. A man whose life was upended by an accidental encounter that spiraled into a series of preposterous coincidences. Each story, with its own peculiar blend of tragedy and absurdity, forced me to re-examine the very nature of truth. One particularly unforgettable evening, held on a secluded rooftop garden overlooking the restless city, the Society unveiled an audacious experiment. They proposed to recreate the precise moment when my life began its descent, a live reenactment of the instant my lie took root and snowballed into an irreversible force. The idea was as ludicrous as it was intriguing, yet the raw passion with which it was presented left me no choice but to agree. The chosen venue was an abandoned theater, once opulent and grand, now a mausoleum of forgotten dreams. Its ornate decor, though faded, whispered stories of a past steeped in splendor. As the reenactment commenced, skilled actors assumed the roles of the key figures in my former life. With unnerving precision, they reenacted every gesture, every half-truth I had spun. I was forced to relive my descent into deception in excruciating detail, from the innocent embellishments to the eventual avalanche of lies that led to my ruin. The experience was as harrowing as it was cathartic. In that surreal space where reality and performance merged, I watched myself unravel before an audience of empathetic strangers. The act of confronting my past, stripped bare on that dimly lit stage, allowed me to exorcise demons I had long thought invincible. In that moment, I recognized that the lie, once a source of desperate pride, had been transformed into a crucible for self-reckoning. I was no longer merely a victim of circumstance. I was an active participant in the narrative of my own downfall, and perhaps my eventual rebirth. Yet, even as the reenactment drew to a close and the applause of the assembled society echoed in the vast emptiness of the theater, I could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The night's events had unlocked a Pandora's box of questions. How deeply had my deception entwined itself with the fabric of the world around me? Could one man's lie be symptomatic of a far larger societal distortion? And most urgently, was redemption possible when the past had so irrevocably altered the course of one's life? In the days that followed, my search for answers led me down paths I never imagined. It was during one of these restless wanderings that I encountered Daniel, a young, earnest journalist with a disarming sincerity and an unyielding determination to uncover hidden truths. Daniel, intrigued by the unfolding scandal of my past, offered to help me piece together the chain of events that had set everything in motion. What began as a series of casual conversations soon evolved into an in-depth investigation that took us from smoke-filled backrooms in Manhattan to the polished corridors of corporate power. Our inquiry revealed that my personal downfall was not an isolated misfortune, but rather a microcosm of a pervasive culture of deception. Documents emerged showing how even the most revered institutions had, for decades, built empires on carefully constructed lies. The scandal we discovered was as much about individual hubris as it was about a collective societal obsession with image over substance. With each new revelation, the boundaries between my personal tragedy and the wider malaise of modern life blurred further. Throughout this tumultuous period, Margaret remained my steadfast anchor. Her unwavering belief in the redemptive power of truth, coupled with a kindness that defied the cynicism of the modern world, sustained me through moments of despair. In the quiet intimacy of late-night conversations over lukewarm tea in her modest apartment, she challenged me to see that the struggle for authenticity was not a solitary battle, but one shared by all who dared to be human. Even in the midst of chaos, she would say, the smallest act of honesty can light a candle in the darkness. As Daniel and I delved deeper into the labyrinth of deceit, the investigation took twists so unbelievable they seemed scripted by fate itself. Clandestine meetings, anonymous sources, and serendipitous encounters wove together a tapestry of intrigue that pointed to a vast network of systemic falsehoods. Every new piece of evidence was both a revelation and a reminder of the fragile nature of truth in a world seduced by appearances. In one unforgettable incident, while poring over dusty archives in a forgotten municipal building, Daniel uncovered a series of memos linking prominent figures in the advertising world to a secretive cabal that had long manipulated public perception. It was as if my own fall from grace had been orchestrated by forces far beyond my control, a small thread in a sprawling web of corruption and artifice. The enormity of what we were unraveling was staggering, and though I felt overwhelmed, it also ignited in me a fierce determination to expose the rot at the heart of our cultural institutions. Then, as if the universe were determined to drive home the lesson of my past, the society arranged one final gathering, a grand convocation of minds, each bearing the scars of their own deceptions. Under a star-strewn sky on the rooftop of an old brownstone, we shared our stories one last time. Archibald, with his silvered hair catching the moonlight, summed up our collective ordeal. We are all architects of illusion in a world that prizes beauty over truth. But tonight, let us pledge to dismantle these facades and reclaim the integrity of our lives. That night, amid laughter tinged with sorrow and toasts raised in defiant hope, I felt a shift inside me. The unbelievable cascade of events, the reenactment, the investigation, the encounters with kindred spirits, had transformed my pain into a hard-won wisdom. The lie that had once cost me everything now served as a crucible from which I emerged, battered yet unbowed, with a renewed commitment to live authentically. Standing at the crossroads of my life, I now understand that redemption is neither swift nor absolute. The journey ahead remains uncertain, its path strewn with remnants of past mistakes and the ever-present specter of human frailty. Yet, with Daniel's steadfast companionship and Margaret's gentle strength lighting the way, I step forward into a future defined not by the lies of yesterday, but by the honest, if imperfect, promise of tomorrow. And so, as I put pen to paper for one final confession, this time not as a lament for what was lost, but as an ode to the enduring power of truth, I embrace the knowledge that every shattered dream, every broken promise, is but a fragment of the mosaic that is life. In the interplay of loss and renewal, I have discovered that even in a world built on illusions, the most radical act of rebellion is to dare to be real. I now look back on the journey with a wry smile, a mixture of regret, gratitude, and an unshakable resolve. The lie that once destroyed me has, in its terrible beauty, opened the door to a life more honest and richly complex than I ever imagined possible. And while the echoes of my past may never fully fade, they have become the raw material from which I continue to build a future defined by authenticity, empathy, and the steadfast pursuit of truth. If this journey from heartbreak to redemption speaks to you, please hit the like button, subscribe for more compelling stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. How has a single lie ever impacted your life? Let's start a conversation and learn from one another.